Thank you, Joanne. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Now, am I worried? Am I tensed? Well, no, because I have beautiful women with me. And the one word I would like to define for these three women is that they are unapologetic. They have taken up space for themselves, and the space that they have taken up is absolutely amazing. Each one has a story to tell. Each one of them is going to give you something to take away home. So let me start a formal introduction because I think that is what is expected of me right now. Though I would love this to be more of a casual, fun talk. Yes. Mike. Yes, like Vrishali says, let's make it fun because we are here to just, have a good time. It's evening, 6 o'clock. Who wants to have everything straight-jacketed, right? Okay, so most women grew up believing, all of us, we grew up believing that, time will take things away from us, be it our beauty, our relevance, or our freedom and our voices. But here are three women who say that age doesn't empty us, it reveals us. And yes, can we have a nice round of applause for these wonderful, beautiful, amazing three personalities? I'm not going to say women, I'm going to say personalities because that's exactly what you are. So age is adventure, wit, wine, and divine. It's a conversation about when we begin performing. No, we don't begin performing. We stop performing youth and we start speaking about the truth. So it's about pleasure without apology, wisdom without softness, and the deep, often spiritual clarity that comes from having lived. So we have with us, as earlier Joanne had introduced, yes, we have Vrishali Samant right there. Then we have Sangeeta Pillai right next to me. And we have Lata Balasubramanian. But no, I'm not apologetic here, okay, because I made a mistake, because I think with these women that doesn't go well. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to start with a common question for all three of you. We'll take turns answering. Was there a moment in your life when actually aging, it stopped feeling like something to fear and it started feeling like a liberation? Let's start with you, Sangeeta.
So as women, growing up, we're taught that the best years of our life are in our 20s and 30s. And we hit 40 and we're supposed to roll over and die. When in fact, it is the opposite. It's only when we get to our 40s and 50s and so on, do we really become aware of who we are, what we want, what we don't want, what we stop apologizing for. So for me, it was very much, I think, hitting my 40s. I remember having my 40th birthday and feeling this sense of immense freedom. I can do what I want and I can be anybody. And I can say anything and I no longer sort of policed myself. When we were talking today, I just said that I've just released my new podcast episode and it's on female pleasure. And I would have never dared to do that in my 20s or 30s. So for me, it's very much a time for liberation and owning your story and owning your voice and really getting out there and being who you are.
Wow. Now that is how she defines it. Over to you, Lata.
Yeah, she is absolutely right, actually. Because we have been brought up, we have been taught to not to do certain things, be this way, that way, and all that. And by the time we realize we are already burdened with our family responsibilities, and at least for the sake of the close ones, you have to face certain things. And that's a time, at 50 or as you cross 40 and nearing 50, is when you really become what if I talk my truth? So what if you don't like me? So what if the society rejects you? It's okay. I know what I am. I know I'm living my life. I don't care who is there with me, who is not there with me. That's it. I do what is good for me, what makes me feel good. That's it.
Whoa, there you go again. Over to you, Vrishali.
Okay, so my story is not as different as anybody. I'm just going to build on what my fellow panelists have said. So I was on the anvil of, turning 40, and everybody, especially the uncles in the family, were like, oh, you're going to be 40. I'm going to die, But internally, I was feeling very different. I was feeling strong. I was feeling empowered. And I was like, okay, I've ticked all the boxes of what a good woman should be, it's my turn now, because if not now, then when? And I found the 40s a very empowering decade, apart from being a very challenging one where caregiving was concerned. But yeah, I mean, to go back to the topic, I think aging, especially for women, empowers you.
Truly, no wonder they say that 40s is the new 20s, and I think all of us subscribe to that. So, well, now I'm going to ask a question to Lata ma'am. You were in the corporate world for quite some time, and then you shifted from corporate, the 16-hour job, you shifted to writing. So, what is it that writing gave you, which success in the corporate world didn't give you?
Corporate world, in fact, gave me money to take care of my family. Of course, not that I did enjoy my work wherever I did work, but I could see that when I started writing and didn't bother about going to a place, particularly at this time, and I'm dead against being disciplined. I just want to do things on my own pace. So when I started writing, I gave my voice to my writing. I didn't bother, and I could write at any time I wanted to write, and I could write anything that I wanted to write. So that was a freedom, the beautiful freedom that I got. And I always believe for every individual, freedom is the first and foremost important thing for everyone. I think others come next, later.
Okay, so yeah. And Rishali, over to you now. I've understood that, humor is an armor for you because you have coped with humor in the sense whenever life has thrown challenges at you, you have actually coped and handled it very beautifully with humor. So how did you crack that code?
How did I crack the humor code?
Yeah, and also being in Mumbai. What is so funny about Mumbai?
I think Mumbai is a hilarious city to live in, and I'm gonna tell you all an anecdote. I know it's dark, but it's humor. Okay, now the city has it's redeveloping, right? So there are these towers that are coming up, 20 stories, 25 stories. Now one depressed, rich, fat man who from the 25th story decided to throw himself down. Fair enough, but where will he throw himself down? Right into the hutments. Now he fell right through the roof, and there was one poor tailor who's working, who's happy with his stock, but the fat man falls on him from the 25th story. That person dies. Okay, and the fat man walks up and walks away. I found it, I know it's dark, but it's funny. It's funny. so I think that the whole, because Mumbai lends itself to a segue where you can just be in a very posh club for lunch, and then you could do an interview with a gangster in Dagadi Chawl, and then probably go for a page 3 party at night. That whole segue, the clash of worlds lends itself to a lot of humor. And speaking of humor, what I also realized was that specifically for me, when I was going through a hard patch, I realized that writing helps you cope, but writing humor helps you cope better. So if you actually take your pain and then just look at it from a humorous side, maybe dark humor, I think it's brilliant. You
Yes,
get good publishers.
And Sangeeta, she's the bad daughter, huh? Yes? Yeah, so when you wrote Bad Daughter, did it actually soften you or did it make you more rebellious?
So I just said this in this other panel, and I was born being a bad daughter. I've always been this. And I didn't set out to be bad, I just was, And I just gave this example of when I was about 4 years old, I grew up in a small village about 40 minutes from here. And all the kids were taken to have their photos taken in the one photo studio in the village. So I was promptly taken along, and the photographer told me to smile. And the more he told me to smile, the less I smiled. And there's this really grumpy photo of me standing like this. And I was always that, And I've just continued to be that over and over. And writing about it actually made me so happy that I was a bad daughter, because it showed me what it meant to keep challenging all the things that I was told. And I kept challenging it, and I'm so glad that I did. So I'm actually more of a bad daughter, having finished writing The Bad Daughter than I was when I started writing it.
So she's become more rebellious. Okay. Now that we're talking about good and bad. Now these are two words. Actually, I don't like them anymore. Okay, because the Indian woman, the typical Indian woman, has to be good, a good mother, a good daughter, a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, a good blah blah blah, a good employee, and it doesn't. The list is endless. So tell me, I feel every woman has shades of grey. Nobody is black and white. But unfortunately, in our society, we have it all, you know, in a framework, a box. So
This is the thing. So, you know, there's a little box that every woman is put into. It's just what you said. When you're born, you have to be the good daughter. Then you get married, you have to be the good wife. Then you have children, you have to be the good mother. And so on. And it's so black and white and binary. And if we don't fit into that very tight box, immediately you're labeled bad. So it's like when you don't conform, when you don't follow the rules, when you challenge the things, you're labeled bad. And come on, there's got to be more to life than that.
exactly. What about the two of you? I mean, she's like waiting, bursting to give me an answer.
No. So, you know, for instance, like one of the things, I just thought of it, I'm surprised we didn't even discuss it in the morning. But for instance, one of the things that a good mother should be doing is cooking good food, right? And the whole maa ke haath ka khana that we have in our Indian custom. Now, this is something that my child has told me, that Mama, if you ever go away, maa ke haath ka khana is one thing I will never miss. So I'll miss other things about you, but not maa ke haath ka khana. So that's what it just reminded me, which is why I was laughing about, you know, the boxes that we need to tick. So yeah.
Yeah, so there's no good and bad. Over to you, Lata.
I've also been rebellious since I remember. So I have always used to play with the boys on the streets. Like I wouldn't play whatever the girls play. I play with the boys, and all my friends were my brother's friends were my friends. I had no female friends, and only off late, I think probably for in the past 10 years, I'm having a few of women in my circle. Before that, it was all boys, and so it was. In fact, somehow I'm proud of that. I'm proud of being rebellious because only when I'm like rebelling, I know that I'm living my truth. Why should I conform to anything and everything that's being told? Because I have tried my best to conform for a little period, like between the day of marriage and for about 5 years. I tried my level best to be a devoted wife, that good woman thing and all that, but it didn't work. I felt bad about myself. I was not me, but still I thought at least there'll be some recognition for all the things that you do. And finally I found out whatever you do, at the end of the day, you don't get anything back. So I don't know how many of you understand Tamil. Now, Papa, I used to say this. தர வரைக்கும் தலை தட்டியாச்சு, அதுக்கு மேலே என்னால் கீழே போக முடியல. So I had to get up, and when I got up like this. I didn't get up slow. So I just got up. So I think there is nothing called good or bad. As long as you are happy with your life, as long as you sleep well and you take care of yourself. And yeah, there are responsibilities. That is a role that you play. Mother is a role, sister is a role. That's not you. You are only you. That's it.
Wow, exactly. This is what I said. You know, they're so unapologetic, and that is the only word I can use here, because I think as women, we try to take up as little space as possible. Oh, am I being a trouble? Am I being a hindrance to someone? So there must have been one point of time in each of your lives when you decided that enough is enough. You know, fear has become freedom. So when was that shift that happened? Let's start with you, Lata ma'am.
In fact, I had a fear probably till we were living with my dad. He was like what do I call him? Very male chauvinistic and very bad. In fact, he was a nice person. Nobody is completely bad. Nobody is completely good. He used to treat us bad sometimes, and he used to beat us. He used to do all that. So there was a fear of like every time we see him, I won't even call him Appa. Like I'll go stand near him and tell him whatever I want to tell him, because even that was slightly like it was like threatening. Like I couldn't call him. I couldn't take that right on him. So it was like that, and everybody in the house were like afraid of him. Not just me, my brother, my mother, her parents, her siblings, everybody. So it was like that. But when I was 16, my mom got divorced from him, and all the three of us, leaving my father, we came out. From then on, I think we started living as friends. So from then on, I think I've never had fear of anything. So it was just that. Fortunately for me, things happened that I didn't have to be afraid of. I think 16 years was too long a period. I think that was enough.
She got out of the toxic the toxic situation, and lo and behold, freedom was there. What about you, Vrishali?
Like, when did I stop fearing?
Yeah, and started, understand.
No, okay. So for me, it was not so much the fear of people. My background is essentially television and media, and all of us in television and media back then in MTV, we all wanted to make films. But somehow I was always very fearful of technology for some reason. Cut to COVID, and I was doing some very intensive caregiving. And I was giving, we have this drink called Adulsa for the cough. So I was giving Adulsa to my geriatric father-in-law, okay? And this was 2021, so everyone was like, tuck, 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 like, popping it. And I get to know that a friend of mine, all of us in MTV back then, one of them is doing a major film with a major superstar. Now, if somebody owns a Louis Vuitton, I will not get jealous, but if someone's making a film and we've dreamt of it together, then I am jealous, and how? And the first thing I say, okay, fine, so tomorrow if I die, then what will people say? That, she was treating somebody with Adulsa and with medicine, and that's how she popped it. I said, no, I want to take my film out there. And that's what propelled me to actually make a film. So it was during that phase I said, forget it, forget the fact that I'm not going to be scared of technology. And I went out there, I made my first short film, and I won the Berlin Indie for it. So yeah, so just walk over your fears.
Right, and the name of the film is Bena. It's a must watch because it shows different, the type of how a woman can change. Like, in a split second, she can be this docile person, and then suddenly she becomes this rebel, right? I'm not revealing anymore. Yes, Sangeeta, now how do I frame this question? Have you ever felt fear?
It's a good question. They say fear is about feeling it and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
That's the definition.
Okay. So?
So, yes, I have also been, fearful at various points in my life. For me, I think the big switch came at a very young age. Growing up, watching my mother, my father was alcoholic, he was abusive, and watching my mother live through that and realizing that she had no choice. She had no money, she couldn't go anywhere, and that was it. And in many ways, that removed all the fear, because the alternative, like if I stuck to that system, the kind of Indian system of, marriage, kids, following your husband, etc., and that really flipped it for me, I think, from a young age. And kind of more recently, I entered a competition for podcasting in the UK in 2018, November 2018. And I always say this in interviews. I had to Google what a podcast was because I didn't know what a podcast was. I'm like an older person. I'm not 20. Entered the competition, dashed off something, never expecting to win. And they called me the next week. And I just managed to get it in. And I entered it at 10 p.m. and the deadline was at 12. And I got a call from Spotify. It was for Spotify. And they said, you've been shortlisted. We had 750 people applying, and 10 of you have been shortlisted. And it was, got put into a boot camp. But I was terrified in that time because in that boot camp, I was old enough to be everyone's mother. They were all like 20-year-olds and I was 40-something then. So it was scary. And I'm not the most technologically savvy person either, So I spent like a year sitting on YouTube watching these tech bros, 20-year-olds talk about, hey man, that's the kit you need. Like how they all talk. So there is fear. It is not the lack of fear. It's doing it anyway.
Right.
And I'm glad I did it because I then created Masala Podcast, which is now the biggest South Asian podcast in the world. It's won a zillion awards and, you know, been on
And-
BBC and all
Yes,
the
and
rest.
I can vouch for it. You must listen to Masala podcast because itna sara masala hai isme. It's total fun for us because it's so interesting and it is so on your face. Talking about that, these days, I think when you're in your 20s or when you're comparatively young, the language that we use, it's very polite. I'm not talking about the 20-year-old, present 20-year-olds, but I'm talking about way back then. Maybe very polite, very sweet, very careful. So, as you have aged, the three of you, how have you changed the way you use language? Oh my God, is that a taboo question? You're laughing so much.
It's just anecdotes. I think I was better behaved at 15 than I'm now in my late 40s. And again, language has changed in the sense that I don't know whether this happens with everyone. Anyone who has children could probably tell me, but you know, when you're angry with your child and you scream at them in your mother tongue, and then you use really bad words. I don't know whether that happens. But so my daughter was, she interned with an ad production house, a film production house. They made ad films. And my friends, this is for a month. And my friend was a little worried because of the kind of language that was used. And she said, hey, guys, please tone it down. We have a 15-year-old who's interning for a month, and we can just tone it down. So my daughter tells her, you're my mother's friend, right? Then you shouldn't be talking like this. So that was the things. I don't really, no, yeah, there are no filters. What's
Right
here
now.
is here, what's here, it's the same.
Yes, Sangeeta.
So I was on the BBC. I was being interviewed about Masala podcast. And I was being interviewed by Anita Rani. She's like a really big name. I can't think of an Indian equivalent, but you know, Shobhade, imagine.
Okay.
Shobhade is interviewing me. So I'm on BBC and live on air, and I swear, and I use the F word.
Oh boy.
and it just came out in conversation because that's how I speak. There are no filters, right? And then Anita Rani had to apologize on behalf of me to the entire nation to say, I'm so sorry, we don't swear on the BBC, so please ignore what Sangeeta just said.
I get the message loud and clear. I think she's conveyed it. There's nothing more you have to say. Lata, over to you.
I have a different take on this. For me, silence was my language when I was young. Normally, I don't talk at all. Even if I talk, people can't hear me.
Oh,
So that this thing I would be like most of the times I avoid talking. Probably that's what made me write also, because I used to put out all my things on writing. Whenever some emotion is there, whatever. When I want to talk to somebody, fight with somebody, I won't do that. I'll go write it on the diary. So that's how I was. But later on, as I started growing, as you get kids, as you rightly say, we start screaming, our voice becomes bigger, louder and all that. But still, till date, I don't use any word, like abusive
Whoa.
words. I never use that, and none of my friends, they are supposed to use it in front of me.
wow. That's
make
character.
I will make it a point, you're not allowed to use such words in front of me. Go do it outside, I'm least bothered. So I don't allow that, because that's also like, my father always used to have bad words for my mother, for me. I was like tired of hearing that. And again, I get married, my husband does the same thing. So I was just tired, dead tired of that. So I told, till date, I don't use that, and I don't allow anybody near me to do that.
Whoa, that's beautiful. I think that deserves a round of applause, doesn't it? Okay, so we're at this stage in life where there are certain things that are non-negotiable. Come what may, I will not compromise. Maybe when I was in my 20s, when I was in my 30s, I would have said okay to it. But what is the one thing that is non-negotiable to you at this point in your life? We'll start with you, Sangeeta.
So it's not negotiable to keep quiet. There were many times in my life, I worked in advertising for many, many years, worked in corporate spaces. Someone would say something that I did not agree with at all, but I would keep quiet. A man would talk loudly when I was speaking, and I would not say anything. Not happening anymore.
For me, not, everything is non-negotiable. Nobody should tell me what to do and what not to do. I decide what I do, even if it's the smallest thing. It could be the biggest thing. I wouldn't listen to anybody telling me what to do and what not to do. If at all I want to drink the glass of water now, and somebody says even before picking up, Lata, you need to drink the water, I'll keep it down. Who are you to tell me to drink water? So that's how I am today.
That's like the photo episode earlier. You don't tell her to smile, right? Okay, Brichali, over to you.
Non-negotiable now is respect. It's complete. Disrespect is completely non-negotiable in any setting with whoever that one is dealing with. It could be in a personal setting. It could be in a professional setting. Earlier, you said that we took a lot of crap, but now there's just no patience, and I think there's no time also in that sense.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm just like, disrespect is completely non-negotiable, and it both ways.
Right.
Both ways. Yeah.
Now that we've covered some things now, as you age, I think, women have started becoming more comfortable with themselves, their body image, their consciousness. So how is it that now you define, compared to the past, what do you think now? How do you look at yourself, your body? I'm talking about your physical body. How do you look at it? Has there been change or?
So I would never use the words that I use now. So on Masala Podcast, sex is one of the common episodes. I talk about female pleasure. I talk about menopause. So words like clitoris or orgasms or whatever just come out of my mouth without, it's not even a thing, right? So I think the comfort in our bodies only comes when we grow older. So for me, it was when I turned maybe in my 40s. I would never be comfortable before in the way that I am now. Now, I'm entirely happy with myself. I'm not just happy with myself, I kind of embrace my own body in that way. I talk to women through my work. On the podcast, I give talks, I write a lot for The Guardian and all of that. It keeps shutting out, but anyway. About accepting ourselves as we are, loving ourselves as we are, because we live in a world that constantly tells women to be thinner and younger and this and that, and we don't need to be. So that comfort is much an age thing. I was not comfortable in my 20s. Now I talk about everything without any issues, really.
No hesitation whatsoever. Brichali, over to you.
The concept of body image has always been very personal because I've always been plus size. And while I never had a problem being that, it was society that had issues. But I'm glad that they did have issues because that's how my first novel came out. Is the mic creating a problem? Is it fine now? Yeah, okay. So that's when the first novel came out. This was back in the day when reality television had come into India. So while we had roadies, we had other reality shows as well coming in. And I had a friend, a very dear friend, who came to me and said, hey, I need to make a pilot for my channel, and will you be a part of it? As the person on whom, the best dietitian, the best hairstylist, the best, who's the guy, Mickey Mehta, the best person who teaches exercise to Femina Miss Indias, they will all work on you. And I'm like, okay, if all this needs to be done to me, then what am I bringing to the table? So she's like, oh, you have personality, you will handle it, the show will go well. And that actually gave me an idea for my first novel, which was Can't Die for Size Zero. So, and I've always written about body positivity, whether it is in my columns with Marie Claire, whether it was my first novel, and even now. Comfort in one's body is, sometimes a person might be very okay. I think it's body shaming that society needs to take responsibility. And not just body shaming, it could be about anything. People just think that they can just pass any kind of comments, whether it is on skin color, whether it is on, maybe a man balding. I mean, why do you always need to have comments? I think that shaming is something that society sometimes need to take onus on. Yeah.
Lata, over to you.
In our society, I think mostly girls are brought up that way, right? Like you have to be bothered about how you look, how you dress and all that. So I think I was also very conscious about how I looked when I was in school, college. Even after that, all of a sudden I'll start going to the gym. Like I'll reduce, I'll do lots of things, and I'll feel bad when I started putting on a little tummy and all that. So I used to get very jittery about all that. But after 42, 43, I think I started, okay, what big deal? We have a lot of other things to think of, concentrate on. As long as your health is good, I think everything is fine. And as long as you carry yourself well in your body, I think that should be okay. Like, it's all like what you think about yourself. And people like you not because of your body, it's because of your personality. So that reality dawns only after 40, I think, generally. That's how it happens.
And I think that's exactly what the three of you are exuding right now. Because when I came and sat here, that's exactly, I didn't feel like saying women, I said personality. So that's so very evident from the three of you. And with age, let's say it's a garden, okay? Life is a garden. With age, you lose something, some weeds, and something grows instead out there. So for each one of you, what is it that has grown, and what is it that you've lost with age?
So the loss would be a slim waistline.
Okay.
But the gain would be more confidence, more self-belief, more voice. I never had a voice when I was younger. Now I have a big voice. A clarity about where my life is going, a clarity about what I'm here to do, what my purpose is. Just everything. It's like you've seen life through black and white and suddenly it's full color. Like that's how it feels to be older, to me.
Okay, that's a beautiful definition. More color in your life, Lata?
I think we have gained more. I don't think we have lost anything because I believe life is just an experience. You keep learning, you make mistakes, you get out of that, you do some other mistake. You do whatever you want to do, but finally one day you think back and you think, oh, we have gone through all this, it's somebody else's life, not mine. I just feel that I don't even I feel attached to that part of the earlier struggles and all. I always talk about it as if I'm talking about somebody else's life. So today what I live is my life, and I have absolutely no regrets in my life. I believe I'm here today because of whatever I've gone through in my life. So if everything is plus, everything is gain. That's it.
She's a person with no regrets, am I right? Yeah. Vrishali, over to you.
So what have I lost and what have I gained? Over the decades, I lost a lot of people who loved me, people who genuinely loved me, and I was brought up, and I was lucky enough, privileged enough to privileged enough to be loved by, say, my grandparents from both the sides, my own mother, friends, and my grandparents, my mother, I lost them to death, and my friends, not to death, some of them, but the others just, the more you grew, the more I grew into my own friendships withered away. And I would always grapple with this whole feeling of how am I going to go on? Especially when I lost my mom, I was like, okay, how am I going to go on? And then I realized and I learned one breath at a time, one moment at a time, one day at a time. And as the years moved on, I realized that, you know what, I'll be fine, I'll be okay. So that is what, that whole insight that at the end of the day, it's you and only you, and you can make the most of what you have with whatever little that is given to you. So that for me was a big learning in my 40s. Yeah.
I think that's a very beautiful flower that's bloomed in your garden, no doubt about it. And we're also with I think we've spoken about wit and wine, so let's come to divine. So when we are young, I don't know how many of you would agree with me, but I think when we are young, we have this feeling that God, okay, but then I'm not going to pray, I'm not going to do, because I have my own life to live. Prayers are a part of a different thing, or there's a universal power, I don't believe in that. So what about now? Was it with you that way? What about now? How do you see divinity? Is there something you believe in it, or how is it? Your take on it?
So when I was younger, I was very dismissive of anything. I was never spiritual, and I would laugh at anybody that was like, oh my God, it's so old-fashioned. But I think with growing older, things I've experienced in the last maybe even 3 to 4 years have really changed things for me. When we were speaking earlier, I told you about my grandmother sort of exploring things like Tantra and seeing her, and she's long dead, and seeing her dance in this temple. The performance, if you're from Kerala, it was called Tullal. And it made me connect, and it made me understand that I'm part of something bigger. And I spoke to the only surviving relative of that family, my uncle, and he told me that she used to dance in temples. It's what she did. And he said in every generation, one woman was the chosen one, right? And it suddenly made me understand that I'm part of that lineage, and I'm here on this earth to carry on that work. You know, I'm here to help women heal. And that really shifted my own relationship with spirituality. So much so that now certain temples I go to, and I kind of feel it in my body. There's a temple near where I was born, where my cousin is sitting here. At the bottom of the house, you go down the fields, and there's a tiny temple. And every time I go there, I just cry. You know, the tears just come out of my eyes, and I just feel something really, really deep there. So I go a lot, and even my uncles laugh at me because I never used to go there. And now this is what I do. So it's become very much part of my life. Even if you told me 5 years ago this is what I'd be laughing at you saying, no, not me ever. But this is who I've become, and now it's become part of who I am and what I am, and it helps me in my life tremendously.
So like you meditate, right? But
Yes.
The way you meditate, can they also know about the way she meditates?
So very, very non-classic, shall I say. So I light a little lamp, and then I sit there and I'll sort of chat with, I say, the goddess. I'm like, come on, I asked you for this and you still haven't done it. You know, that's my...
So yeah, she practically just talks her mind
I'm like,
out,
hey,
right?
come on, you know, dude, really.
Right, and Rishali, you.
Well, again, adding to what you said, in your 20s, you want to be cool, you don't want to believe in God, you don't want to believe in divine, anything that your parents tell you, you're not going to listen to it. Same trajectory. And then, of course, you know, life has its way of working things out. And at a point in time where I had my all is lost moment, literally, I was like, no, I realize I need help. I need to believe in something because I've just lost hope completely. And that is when I turned to chanting. So yes, it's become a very regular part of life right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Lata?
There's a different story again. I was very religious when I was young. I used to go to temple every day, not missing even one day. I used to go to temple every day. And I used to do on Saturdays, we have to do like some lighting lamps and all. And every day I don't go out without vibhuti on my this thing. So it was a ritual which I believed in, but it's not that I was like, I'll go pray, ask God for something. But I'll definitely go to this thing, I'll say everybody should be nice. The world should be okay, that's all. I've never traded with him and all that, I've never done that. But after a point in time, maybe in my 35s, 36, I started thinking otherwise, and I turned an atheist. So I don't believe in God in the form of worshipping in any form, and I don't get into spirituality. I don't get into anything, but I believe in one thing, which is universal energy. I believe we are all connected, not just the human beings. We are all connected, even a leaf in this thing, we are all connected in some way or the other. So every action of ours does have an impact on the world in some way or the other. So that I believe in. And I also believe that when you want something from the bottom of your heart, the universe will conspire to give it to you. I know it will not just give it to you. You have to want it 100%. And when you want it 100%, you will automatically start working towards it. So you will not blame the situation or circumstances or people for that. So that's why I say 100%. So that's it. That's it. I don't believe in anything else.
So it's so evident that each one of you have had a flip, you know, right? In your own way. Either you believed or you didn't believe, but then it was just flipped, right? Okay, now, since I'm having the three of you on the panel, I have the guts to ask this question. We're going to go into risk territory. that is, she doesn't have a problem with it because you have spoken about it in your podcast. Pleasure. Pleasure for a woman is something that is many times denied. You have to wait for someone for getting pleasure. Pleasure could be anything. It could be food. It could be wine. Yeah, wine. Yeah, I'm coming to you. Yes, it could be food. It could be drinks. It could be bodily pleasure. It could be anything at all. So tell me the one thing that you know that was denied to you earlier, and today you have no qualms. Like she just opened up right now. I'm starting with Rishali because she said wine. Yes, so go for it. So what is that one thing that was denied or you felt denied? You were.
It wasn't denied to me, but when things happen and you start questioning, okay, what are the basic things that a person needs? Okay, so yeah, it is roti, kapda or makan, and I will add wine and a book, and that's all. So yeah, for me it's like an evening with a glass of wine or maybe whiskey, and then you're reading 10 pages maybe, and that's good enough.
Fair enough. Yes. Okay. So it's not been denied, but you continue with that. You're happy with it.
Unapologetically happy. See, unfortunately, alcohol or whiskey has always been a male bastion, But hello, we women also enjoy our single malts. We enjoy our scotch. And maybe not too much. Maybe it's 2 pegs, 3 pegs, whatever it is. But yes, I do enjoy my 3 tots of whiskey or wine with a good book. And that's how I like to close my evening, yeah. So that's pleasure for me.
Right. Lata?
My book, The Toilet Seat, talks about women. That is, I add sex to roti, kapda and makhan. That is also a basic necessity. Okay. And wine, I also smoke. I started smoking when I was 50. Till then, I had never smoked. Okay.
I think you should say that on the mic.
I'll get cancelled. I just said it's a form of pranayam. You smoke in and out.
That's okay. When I feel I should stop, I'll stop. I do it because it gives me pleasure. That's it. Doesn't have to give it to everyone. So whatever I do is like, as she rightly said, I love reading. I love drinking with my friends. We have a session every week with my friends. And I have friends from 25 to 75. No age part, no gender, nothing. We all get together, some 12, 13 of us. We have a session on every Saturday.
Oh.
So I do what I feel like doing, and I don't allow anybody to interfere in that.
Wow. Sangeeta?
So when I was younger, I lived, our family was very strict, you couldn't wear shorts, all of that. So I moved to Bangalore, and you will not believe the first thing I did when I had my own place. I bought a bottle of Baileys. I drank half a bottle of Baileys. I wore shorts, and I watched a TV show called Ally McBeal, which you probably won't remember.
Yes, of course.
So this was for me an idea of pleasure. It was so denied, and it was that. But I think the broader point also I want to make is something you touched upon, which is women are brought up to believe that pleasure is external. It comes from outside. Like we have to find a man who will then give us pleasure. Or we have to, achieve something in order to have pleasure. We have to earn money to, it's all external. When in fact, women are the sources of pleasure. We walk around in this world, we are the embodiment of pleasure. As you, in our own culture, you talk about Kundalini, when the Kundalini opens, that's kind of the power source that we all carry. Women have multiple orgasms, men don't, right? So we were made for pleasure. Nature, Mother made us for pleasure. But we've denied it our entire lives, and we are being denied it.
You want to add something? Okay. So actually, I think today we are having this conversation in 2026, which I think 10 years ago wouldn't have been possible because it was so very taboo, so many things. But presently, Gen Z is also slightly responsible because they speak their mind, right? So what is the one thing that if there are any Gen Zs, Gen Alpha, or anyone who are much younger, what is the one thing you would like to tell them that they shouldn't apologize for, that they shouldn't regret about from your experience? What would be that one thing?
I would just say go live your life. Don't let anybody tell you whether it's society, media, social media, whatever. And the younger people, sadly, social media is a big dominant factor in their lives. But don't let anybody tell you, you know who you are, you know what you want your life to be. Just go live it.
Right.
Same thing almost, you're not born here to please everyone or anyone for that matter. Please yourself, be happy, do whatever you feel like, but if you're 100% sure about it, not 99%, if you're 100% sure about it, just go ahead and do it. Even if you fail, freedom comes with responsibility, just remember that, nothing else.
Okay.
Is there anybody who's from Gen Z over here? No. Is
Oh,
there?
it's okay.
Like
We're
advice
talking. You
and
can
you-
tell people whom you know who are in Gen Z.
But you know what? So my experience with millennials was, which was again very refreshing. There were lots of girls millennials in that entire generation, who wanted marriage, but they didn't want children. And I think that too needs to be normalized in society. And I was very impressed that they voiced the fact that, yeah, we want the institution of marriage, we don't want children. And then, of course, the Indian parenting, nahi, ek to kar lo, kind of a thing. So that's about it. But yeah.
Yes, so actually I still have more questions, but I think it would be very unfair to them because I'm sure people in the audience, oh yeah, there she is. Of course, I already have someone from the audience who's...
Gen Z? Ah.
No, so shall I pass on this mic to her?
Hello. First of all, I just love the title of this session, Wit, Wine. Maybe we should have had some vodka also, and divine. Okay. This question is around the overstretched, that's my perspective, of body shaming. And there was also, at one point, all of you were discussing how comfortable you get with your body, and you were always a plus size. So I grew up, my childhood gives me memories, fond memories, where we used to call people Undapakru or Ponnatadiyan or Kodavayaran, and it was considered very normal. So
That's why I like South India. That's why.
okay, so this is so deep rooted in our cultural context, and it is not to shame, but it's a sign of affection. But right now, with the advent of digital media, this body shaming has been stretched to such a point that we cannot talk anything about any person. That's one. And the good thing about the body shaming, we come to know now, that existed during my childhood, it also gave the person a reason to accept who or she was, not to always defy it, which is the trend now. So as writers, my question to you is, when you use language, when you construct your narratives rooted in a cultural context, where do you draw the line? Where is that line in your language, in your stories? Over.
Get the question in terms of language. I do get the question in terms of social media, that whatever is said in social media. But these days, whether you say anything for or against about anything at all, you're going to be judged. So when you're putting any opinion out there, be ready to even be cancelled. So that's the kind of thick-skinned person one needs to be about social media. I did not get your question about the line of language. That I didn't get, because I'd really like to answer this question.
Basically, when you write, is there a conscious effort that you bring in to not defy these existing norms? Yeah, chotu motu, when you are writing a story, for example, do you consciously avoid lest it would, storm up some controversy or whatever?
No, so I'm
So
speaking specifically about body image, because I've done that kind of writing. I've written about body positivity or body image. You, as a writer,
Yeah.
the best practice is to write your truth. Now, my truth would be very different from your truth.
Correct.
but my truth might just resonate with many people. Like they say, the personal is the political. So I think that the only conscious decision that I take when I'm putting words to the screen, I wouldn't say pen to paper now, but words to the screen when I'm typing, is that am I speaking from the prism of truth?
Yes.
That's it. That's all that I keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think we have time for just one more question. Please make sure that you keep your question short and crisp.
Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. And I would like to ask you to share one moment in your life when you truly stood up for yourself and you felt proud. When maybe someone tried to pull you down or to hurt you, and you felt like that's time to protect myself, that's time to have a voice. Thank you.
Yeah. How much time have you got? Because there are so many moments in life when we are challenged and we have to then stand up for ourselves. When we are in, when we're in our 20s, when we're in our 30s, when we're in our 50s. And I think what happens with age is it becomes easier. Like when I was 20 years old and someone challenged me at work or put me down, I wouldn't have the courage to sort of stand up and say, no, you can't do that. Whereas now in my 50s, it's a lot easier. And sometimes, especially in places like London where you live, it's not even direct. The challenge can be quite subtle. Say somebody, I judge a lot of podcast competitions. If you sit there and someone's not addressing you directly, they might be talking to someone else. So then the challenge becomes to sort of stand up, address it, and address them in a way that you're like, I see where you're going, and you're not doing that. So in my case, it's many, many. And I think the others will have a few things to say.
Okay, this is getting into very personal territory, but it is also something that I want to speak about in life. A lot of times what happens, and this happened with me very recently, I'm going through a separation, and also because of a lot of financial mistrust. So the loans that were taken, and usually what happens with, with these loan people is that they'll call you even if you've not taken it because it's your spouse. And the loan sharks can get really nasty, okay? Earlier, I would be very polite about it, and because I was like, okay, we'll deal with it, whatever it takes. And then one day I just lost it. I was like, do whatever you have to. And I gave it back. I was like, this is it. That's where I said that, that is when I said that respect is paramount. It is just a non-negotiable. And then I gave it back in the Hindi galis, so as to say, which otherwise good Indian women do not use bad language, right? But then I just took it on, and yes, I was guttural, I was whatever, but the calls just stopped, and that was the time I said, I'm not at fault, so I'm not going to take anybody's nonsense over here, and that's when the calls stopped. And I'm also working towards it. We'll talk about hopefully next Mathrubhumi session. Yeah, thank you.
As Sangeeta rightly put it, there are so many instances that have happened through our life. But one thing I can tell you, just one incident, is like when I was conceived with my daughters. She is the second. I had a son before. I have always loved kids, and probably that's why I even slept with my husband. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. Okay. So out of kids, I love kids, but I have always wanted a daughter. But the first kid happened to be a boy, so I had to have my second kid, and I had to have a daughter. I didn't know how it would be, but I decided I have to have a second kid. So I was financially in a very bad situation. I was the only earning member, which my money had to take care of my family, my in-laws' family. So my mom, she was dead against this. She said, already you're struggling, and how do you know that it is going to be a girl? And don't do that. And there are friends who came and advised me, and in your financial situation, I don't think you should do this and all that. But I told everyone, this will be a daughter, and I will be able to take care of them both without depending on any of you. I'm not going to come to your house to take care of them. I will be able to take care of them. Today I'm proud of both my kids. In fact, my daughter is 34 plus, not married. She's doing her PhD, and I still stand for her. I'm so proud of her.
Yes, and she has the best mother in the world, like Roshali said it. Okay, so I really wish this would continue for some more time because I was having a good time, and I must say, from what the three of you have spoken, it's like understanding yourself better, having a truer relationship with yourself. That's what I would take as a takeaway from this. And also, it's not about age, is not about shrinking. It's about actually taking up more space. So thank you, wonderful personalities. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to the audience as well. Over to you, Joanna.
Thank you so much to you too.
Yes, thank you.
So the session Age is Adventure, Wit, Wine and Divine has come to an end. This session was sponsored by New India Assurance, and I know everyone sitting here right now feels the same way. It was a wonderful session. I personally thoroughly enjoyed the session. So thank you so much for being a great audience.